Solutions to Quiz 7 for Math 111. Let's see, we're given a couple of functions, f of x and g of x, and asked to compose them together. So let's see, first we want to do f of g of x. And the way you do that is you replace g of x with what g of x is, 1 over x. So f of 1 over x, well here's f of x. So what I will do is replace all the x's in that equation with 1 over x. So this right here is f of g of x, but unfortunately I said to simplify. So you got to think back a couple of weeks and view this as, well, if it were just a fraction over a fraction, we know how to divide fractions, but it's not quite that easy because we have this 1 plus 1 over x. So what we'll want to do is change this to x over x. And change this 2 right here to 2x over x. And the reason why is now we have a common denominator on the top and the bottom. So up top we get x plus 1 over x, and on the bottom we get 2x minus 1 over x. And then if you remember, dividing fractions is a lot like multiplying fractions, except you have to flip the denominator upside down. You get to here, and then you notice, oh, I got an x here and an x here. I can cancel those because you can cancel over multiplication, and what you're left with is x plus 1 over 2x minus 1. Alright, now we gotta do that again. G of f of x. Fortunately, this one works out a little bit nicer. Let's see, we'll start the same way, replacing on the inside here. F of x is equal to all this mess, 1 plus x over 2 minus x. And let's see, g of x is right here. So g of this mess is 1 divided by, and then everywhere you see an x, you replace it with all this stuff. 1 plus x over 2 minus x. And again, this is your answer, but it's not simplified. The way I would simplify this is I'd think about the top as 1 over 1, and then you got a fraction over a fraction. So to divide them, it's just like multiplying fractions, except you flip the bottom upside down, and what you end up with is just this guy right here, 2 minus x over 1 plus x. Kind of this upside down. So those are your answers to part A. Part B, find the domain of g of f of x, so this second one here. Okay, so remember the domain of g of, okay, so first of all, g of f of x is the exact same as g of f of x. Okay, so to figure out the domain of this guy, we have to make sure that f of x makes sense, and then we have to make sure that g of f of x makes sense. So first of all, domain of f of x. Well, let's see, what was f of x again? F of x is this mess. No square roots going on in there, which was nice. So we just have to make sure you don't divide by 0. How would you divide by 0? If 2 minus x equals 0. So if x equals 2, we divide by 0. So the only thing that will not work is when x equals 2. Alright, now we want to worry about the domain of the composite function, g of f of x, which was this thing right here, 2 minus x over 1 plus x. Again, no square roots, which is nice, so we just have to make sure that we don't divide by 0. We want to make sure 1 plus x is not 0. We want to make sure that x does not equal negative 1. So our domain of g of f of x is the intersection of these two domains. That is, it has to make sense here, it has to make sense here. The things that make sense in both of these places is everything except for negative 1 and positive 2. So it's x cannot be negative 1 or positive 2. Or if you wanted an interval notation, which I guess I didn't ask for, So maybe I'll put or right there so the grader knows. Everything up to -1. Everything between -1 and 2. And everything bigger than 2. So that right there is our domain. And finally, the last part, we want to find f inverse of x. So first of all, f of x was equal to what now? 1 plus x over 2 minus x. 1 plus x over 2 minus x. So the way you find the inverse function is step 1, you change f of x into a y. Step 2, you solve this for x. That's not easy to do because you got this fraction right here. What you want to do is get x all by itself. I think the easiest way to do this is to multiply both sides of the equation by 2 minus x. Maybe I write that in light blue so you can see what I'm doing. And the reason you do that is now you can cancel out the denominator there and the 2 minus x. And what you're left with is 2 minus x times y equals 1 plus x. Okay, so now at least we have everything up on one line, but still we have a couple different x's floating around. So to solve for x, you'll want to distribute this y through. 2y minus xy equals 1 plus x. Then get all the x's on one side of the equation. So maybe we'll add xy over here and subtract 1 over there. And get 2y minus 1 equals x plus xy. So I added this to the right side and subtracted this over to the left side. And now to solve for x, you can factor, we have 2 x's here, we want just 1 x to solve for. So factor 1 x out from both terms, and you get x times 1 plus y equals 2y minus 1. Or finally, x is equal to 2y minus 1 over 1 plus y, or y plus 1, however you want to write it. I guess that's not quite my answer. That is the right answer, but we want f inverse of x. We want our variable to be x. So what you do is you change x into f inverse of x, and you change the y's into x's. And that right there is your final answer. That's the end of the quiz.